Shocking discovery. Billionaire finds Maid homeless and transforms her life in an incredible way. In the suburban sprawl of Denver, where manicured lawns thrummed with the sound of lawnmowers and cheerful ice cream trucks, Julia worked herself to the bone. A single mother in her late 30s, she wiped down the gleaming surfaces of a luxury kitchen, the glint of chandeliers overhead lighting a contrast to the shadows of her life. Each swipe of the cloth was not just a job, it was sweat and determination. Her heart ached for her 11-year-old son, David, with his bright eyes filled with dreams. Little did anyone know, their home was a cramped car, parked in the dark corners of empty lots. The thought of a warm bed felt like a distant fantasy. That rainy morning changed everything. Ethan Parker, a billionaire tech mogul, jogged past alleyways when he saw Julia's car, the wheels half sunk in puddles. He noticed her worn-out shoes, the damp strands of her matted hair, and it struck a chord deep within him. With one swift decision, he knocked on her window. The world outside felt like a blur as he offered her a warm meal and a coat, and the kindness in his gaze thawed the bombshell of despair Julia deep in carrying. Their laughter echoed in the air as they shared stories, creating a flicker of hope amidst the daunting daily grind that as days turned to weeks. Their unexpected friendship blossomed. Julia revealed her dreams of returning to school, a stable home for David, a life full of memories instead of survival. Yet, each joyful moment was shadowed by Ethan's circle of affluent friends. During a lavish dinner party, judgment laced the air when they dismissively dubbed Julia as one of those people. Tension crackled between them. A battle of principle raged within Ethan. Would he stand by Julia, or bow to the whispers of privilege that threatened to suffocate their friendship? In the fire of that uncomfortable tension, Julia wrestled with her own feelings of inadequacy. As whispers of doubt painted her self-image, she pushed Ethan away, convinced that her struggles would taint his life. He too met an emotional crossroads: continue to swim in the waters of wealth and status, or dive into the ambiguity of true human connection with Julia. The realization hit him when Julia, fighting tears, spoke about the beauty of possibilities and the struggle of dreaming while living in a car. Ethan found himself torn between the laughter of his friends and the truth that glittered in Julia's eyes. He realized that she was not just a maid but a passionate mother, fighting against insurmountable odds, making him reconsider everything he held as valuable. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Ethan stood in front of his friends, the clink of glasses fading into a deafening silence, as he spoke up, resisting their disdain. Would he have the courage to redefine the values they all held so high? Julia's future hung in the balance, and as both faced the uncertainty of a life intertwined, the air thickened with possibility. Would love and integrity emerge victorious, shattering the ceilings life had built around them? Ethan's heart raced as he faced the haughty stares of his friends. The laughter faded, replaced by disbelief and shock. They had always shared jokes and stories of their affluent lives, but this felt different. Here he was, advocating for someone they had dismissed as one of those people. He swallowed hard, words hanging like heavy stones on his tongue. Julia is not just a maid, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. Her story matters. She has dreams, just like us. Do you know what it's like to have to fight for every single moment? She is working to create a life for her son, and frankly, I admire that. The silence thickened. A barely concealed scoff from one of his friends shattered the moment. You're defending a charity case, Ethan. What do you really know about her life? Ethan's gut twisted. The question cut deeper than any blade. He opened his mouth to reply but faltered. Memories of Julia's laughter intertwined with the bitter taste of judgment lingering from the party replayed in his mind. He couldn't allow the false bravado of wealth to drown out the truth in his heart. Meanwhile, Julia sat in her cramped car, a few miles away. David was asleep in the back seat, his gentle breaths a comforting sound amidst the chaos of her thoughts. She knew Ethan was not like the others. He had shown her kindness when she felt invisible. But doubt crept in. How could she allow herself to hope for more? Did she really believe someone like him could care without judgment? Then came a knock on the window. It was Ethan, looking more intense than she'd ever seen him, his brow furrowed with determination. She rolled down the window, heart racing. "Julia," he started, urgency laced in every word. "I need you to listen. You deserve more than this. I want to help." Tears prickled her eyes. "Help? How can you help someone like me? I'm just a random maid, homeless with a kid. I don't belong to your world." Her voice broke, cracking under the weight of her insecurities. Ethan leaned closer, his eyes piercing through her doubts. "You are so much more than that. You inspire me. Let us find a way to change things. Together." His promise dangled in the air, bold and electrifying. Julia shook her head, unsure. The voice of her own fears clawed back, whispering that she wasn't worthy of such kindness. But the flicker of hope he ignited wouldn't be extinguished. "What do you want?" she finally murmured. "I want you to let me help you find a place for you and David, a job that doesn't feel like a never-ending struggle. I want to support your dreams. Just take this chance," Ethan replied, honesty radiating from him. For a moment, decades of hardship collided with the warmth of promise. She could see a path illuminated by his sincerity, yet fears tangled within her heart. What if she stepped into that light only to find shadows waiting? As Julia weighed her options, David stirred. His eyes blinked open, full of innocence and dreams. In that single glance, she saw the future, and it pushed her toward a choice she hadn't thought possible. "Okay," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper, yet laced with determination. As they spoke about possibilities, Ethan grinned, light flickering in his eyes. "This is the beginning, Julia. This changes everything." But just as they began to plan, a chilling call interrupted. A family member back home had fallen ill. Julia's heart sank. Would she lose the chance to change everything before it even began? With uncertainty hanging between them, would she find the strength to confront her past before moving forward into a hopeful future? The night deepened, carrying questions that felt heavier than ever. The call from her sister had struck Julia like a bolt of lightning. She grasped the phone tightly, feeling the tension run through her veins. "What do you mean? Auntie is sick," she whispered, her heart slamming against her chest. "Julia, they thought it was just the flu at first, but it's more serious. You need to come home. Mom is worried." Every word felt like a weight piling on her shoulders. Home. It was supposed to be a place of comfort, yet for years, it had been tangled in shadows of struggles and responsibilities. She could already hear the familiar sounds of her childhood, her mother's soft cries, her father's quiet attempts to console her. They needed her now, more than ever. Ethan's voice broke through her haze. "What's wrong?" He could read her like an open book, concern etched across his handsome features. "It's my family. My aunt, she is sick. I have to go back," Julia stammered, glancing fearfully at David, who was now fully awake and rubbing his sleepy eyes. Suddenly, she felt as if she was teetering on a cliff, suspended between two worlds: the dreams Ethan offered and the reality of her responsibilities. Ethan's expression shifted. "But what about what we just talked about? You can't just go back to that life. You deserve this chance, Julia." She could see the fire in his eyes, the hope he had wrapped around them like a blanket. But hope felt risky, like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. "It's not that simple. They need me," she insisted, her voice breaking. "I can't chase some dream when my family is in crisis." He stepped closer, reducing the distance that had slipped between them. "And what about your dreams? Your future?" "Sometimes dreams have to take a back seat," Julia replied, fighting the tears threatening to spill over. "What if I go back? What if I get stuck again?" A silence fell between them, thick and heavy. For a moment, it felt like the world had paused, the sounds fading into a quiet hum. David finally broke the spell, reaching up toward Julia, seeking the comfort only she could provide. In that small gesture, Julia saw everything. She saw the mother who wanted to protect and provide for her child. "Listen," Ethan said gently, gripping her shoulders as if grounding her to the moment. "You can't let fear dictate your choices. You're stronger than that. You're making a choice out of love, but don't forget to love yourself too. I want to help. No matter what happens, we'll figure it out together." Turning her gaze back to David, She felt the warmth of his tiny hand clutching her finger. Someday he would look to her for guidance, for resilience. Would she really be able to show him that life could be more than just survival? With each heavy breath, Julia teetered on the edge of possibilities and old habits. Her aunt needed her, but so did David, and in a way, so did she. Ethan, she began, hesitating. What if I get swallowed by my past? What if I can't find a way back to hope? Then we'll fight it together, he said firmly. But before they could weave their plans, Julia's phone buzzed again. It was a text from her sister. Please hurry, Julia. We need you, and in that moment, she felt a rush of cold dread. Torn between duty and a tiny ember of hope, Julia realized her path was unclear. As Ethan's eyes searched hers for answers, a wave of uncertainty crashed over her. Would she have the strength to confront her demons while reaching for the light? Would she risk everything for a chance at something brighter? With a fleeting touch of determination sparking in her heart, she took a deep breath. I'll go, she declared, though the uncertainty lingered like a shadow. But stepping backward felt like surrendering a chance she never thought she could have. How could she make a choice that felt right when it was so steeped in ambiguity? And as they stood there, reality swirling around them, she knew one thing for certain. To transform her future, she first had to face her past, but would she discover strength or fall back into the darkness? Julia's heart raced as she clutched the phone, the vibrations from the text still buzzing in her hand. Everything around her blurred. Emotions surged like a tidal wave, threatening to pull her under. Julia, are you all right? Ethan's voice cut through her whirlwind thoughts, his brow furrowed with concern. She took a deep breath, summoning the strength to speak. I have to go now, she said, her voice steadying, gaining a newfound resolve. David stood beside her, eyes wide, his tiny presence grounding her amidst the chaos. Okay, Ethan replied, softening. He gently brushed a stray hair behind her ear, a gesture so intimate, so filled with potential, that it made her chest ache. But promise me you'll call me as soon as you can. And just promise you won't lose yourself. Julia nodded, unable to find the right words. As she glanced down at David, the unwavering trust in his eyes reminded her of why she had to make this journey back home. She needed to be his anchor, to show him that everything would be okay, even if she was teetering on the line between love and fear. Once she had made her decision, clarity overtook her. Julia moved away from Ethan and grabbed her bag, slapping it against her hip. Let us go, David, she said, urgency weaving through her voice. Mommy? He tilted his head, a hint of confusion flickering across his face. I know. It's going to be okay, she assured him, each word reflecting her heart's desire. As they stepped out onto the chilly street, the air felt electric. Julia's thoughts raced ahead to what awaited her: the sounds of home, the burdens that came with it, and the urgent meeting that lay ahead. Would her aunt be okay? What if her family needed more from her than she could give? The drive felt like an eternity. Each passing streetlight illuminated a new worry in Julia's mind, a mix of childhood memories that both comforted and haunted her. What if going back meant reopening old wounds? She had built a life where she was forging her own identity, and the thought of drowning back into the turmoil of family feuds and hidden resentments sent shivers down her spine. David's little hand squeezed hers tightly, grounding her once more. His simple presence brought peace. Mommy, are we going to see Grandma? He asked, his innocent curiosity cutting through her anxiety. Yes, sweetheart, she replied, trying to suppress the tightness in her throat. And we're going to help her. Like superheroes? A small laugh bubbled from her. Yes, just like that. Superheroes. However, a shadow crossed her heart, reminding her that she wasn't sure if she felt like a superhero or just a woman running back toward the storm. When Julia finally pulled into her childhood neighborhood, memories flooded back, a kaleidoscope of laughter, tears, and a sense of belonging that had frayed over the years. With each turn, her stomach twisted. The old oak tree stood at the end of the block, strong and tall, reminding her of her younger self, climbing to escape the burdens below. Mommy, look, David yelled, pointing at the tree as if it were a mythical creature. Yes, honey, it's beautiful, she acknowledged, though it felt like a ghost from her past beckoning her to revisit memories. As they parked in front of her family home, Julia felt like she was stepping into a time capsule. The house appeared untouched by time, yet within her, everything was different. Would her family still see the girl they once knew or the woman she had become? Taking a deep breath, Julia stepped out, David's hand firmly in hers. With the door looming before her, her heart thudded hard in her chest. Life had sculpted her into someone new, but would they accept that transformation? Julia turned to David, who looked both excited and nervous. "Whatever happens, we'll get through this together," she whispered, more to herself than him. As she reached out for the front door, she felt an unexpected tremor in her fingers. A feeling she couldn't shake. What if this reunion would force her to finally confront choices she'd buried deep within? This was it, the moment she had both waited for and dreaded. With one solid breath, she grasped the doorknob and turned. Would she find the solace she sought, or would the ghosts of her past rise up to haunt her once more? The answer lay just behind the door, waiting for her to step inside. As the door creaked open, Julia was hit by a wave of familiar scents: wood polish, the faint hint of lavender, and the unmistakable aroma of her grandmother's cooking wafting from the kitchen. It was disorienting. This was the place where her childhood dreams had danced, yet it also held the shadows of fractured relationships and unspoken words. "Mommy, it smells good," David exclaimed, breaking the spell. Julia forced a smile, swiping at her unruly emotions. "Yes, it does," she said, her heart still racing as she stepped inside. The entryway was just as she remembered, with family photos lining the walls, smiling faces frozen in time, each one a chapter of her history. But what about the present? Julia felt herself drawn into the pictures, searching for glimpses of reassurance that those same people remained unchanged. She was terrified and relieved all at once. "Julia," a warm, familiar voice called from the kitchen. "Grandma." David tugged at her hand, his excitement bubbling over. In that moment, Julia's heart soared. Just around the corner, her grandmother was swiftly approaching, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked smaller than Julia remembered, but the same light sparkled in her eyes, of beautiful resilience that had weathered many storms. "Oh dear." Grandma swept David up into her arms, spinning him around with a laughter that resonated through the house. Julia's heart melted as the sound wrapped around her, but she still felt the weight of her fears lurking nearby. "Come here, darling," Grandma beckoned, setting David down. "I'm so glad you're here." Julia stepped forward, and they hugged tightly. The warmth felt right, yet it surfaced all the tension that had simmered beneath her skin. "I'm here," she said softly, feeling her resolve slip and the tears prick at her eyes. "Let us sit down. I made your favorite." As she led them to the living room, Julia glanced around, noticing the small changes: a few new pieces of furniture, the fresh coat of paint on the walls, but the heart of the house felt the same. After serving up plates of steaming pasta, they all settled around the wooden table. Conversations flowed freely. David eagerly chimed in with stories from his school, and Grandma hung on every word, laughing and asking questions. Yet, Julia found it harder to join in as the air thickened with every recollection. The laughter was cut short when Julia caught sight of Grandma's hands trembling slightly as she reached for the utensils. A familiar pang of worry hit her hard. "Grandma," she started, her voice trembling. "How have you been feeling?" The room fell silent. Grandma seemed to weigh her words, her expression becoming serious. "Oh, Julia, old age comes with its own sets of challenges," she replied, a tinge of stubborn pride in her voice. "I'm not just an old lady. I'm still your grandma," she added, attempting to lighten the mood with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Julia felt the cracks in her heart deepen. The fear of losing this pillar of her childhood loomed like a specter against the joyful atmosphere. David stared at her with wide, innocent eyes, picking up on the shift, his little hands clasped together in silence. "Grandma," Julia said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what is really going on?" For a moment, there was only the sound of the clock ticking, each tick echoing the weight of unspoken truths. She could see that Grandma's defenses were strengthening. The tension hung heavy between them, creating an invisible barrier that Julia knew she had to break through. But how? How could she dare to ask for the truth when she had buried her own demons so deeply? Just then, the front door creaked open again, and Julia's breath caught in her throat. Who could it be? Another ghost from the past? Or would this unexpected visitor hold the key to unraveling the family's hidden struggles? The answer loomed in the silence, thick with anticipation. Julia turned her gaze toward the door, heart racing. The moment felt amplified, each second drawn out like the last notes of a haunting melody. Then, she heard footsteps, deliberate and heavy, approaching with a shaky cadence. "Is that?" Grandma's voice wavered, as if she too felt the tension snap in the air like a taut wire. The door swung open fully, revealing a figure cloaked in shadows. Julia squinted against the light, but as the person stepped forward, the familiar shape of her estranged father emerged. Time hadn't been lenient with him. His hair was streaked with gray, and a deep crease marred his forehead. "Dad." Julia's voice was a mixture of disbelief and uncertainty. "Julia," he said, his voice gravelly, holding a weight that came with years of absence. The warmth of the home shrank under the weight of the moment, replaced by memories that felt more like chains than comfort. David, oblivious to the history, ran up to him. "Are you my grandpa?" he asked with innocent curiosity, breaking the thick silence. His excitement clashed with the somber atmosphere, creating a jarring juxtaposition. Yes," he replied hesitantly, kneeling down to meet David's eye level. Julia watched, her heart thundering. What did this mean? Was he back for good, or just to stir up more chaos? "Look, I didn't know you were here," her father continued, his eyes darting between Julia and Grandma. I came to talk. Can we sit?" The request hung uncomfortably in the air. Julia felt her grandmother tense beside her, the unspoken words from their earlier conversation still lingering. Julia wanted to scream that they had just begun to breathe life back into their fractured bonds. But here was this man, the storm of their past, ready to wreak havoc once again. "All right," Julia finally said, swallowing her anxiety as they moved to the living room. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were closing in on the history that sat heavily on their shoulders. They slowly settled into stiff chairs, David perched on Grandma's lap, blissfully unaware of the turbulence bubbling beneath the surface. Julia could feel her heart racing, each beat a protest against the gathering silence. "Julia, I've made a lot of mistakes," he started, staring at his intertwined fingers. "I want to try to fix it, if you'll let me." His words flew out like a lit fuse. Julia's mind raced. Fix it? After all the years, after all the hurt? A fresh wave of anger threatened to spill over, but something deeper held her back, an unacknowledged longing for the father she never really had. "Why now?" she asked, the question hanging like a dark cloud. "All these years, you didn't even care to reach out." "I know. I've been a coward," he answered, his voice cracking. "But I'm here now. I'm trying. If you'll just give me a chance, I want to be part of your life." Julia felt Grandma's hand squeeze her arm, a silent plea for patience. And just like that, memories flooded back, the laughter, the warm summer nights spent around a campfire, and the moment it all unraveled. David looked up at her, eyes wide, the innocence of youth cutting through the thick tension. "Mommy, you can still give him a chance, right?" Her son's face held such hope, yet Julia felt her heart plunge. Was it safe to open this door? Could it lead them to healing, or would it just bring more pain? The clock on the wall ticked loudly, the sound creeping back in with renewed ferocity. Julia took a deep breath, trying to still the storm within. The very air crackled with possibility. But which way would the currents pull her? As she opened her mouth to respond, a second figure suddenly walked in from the kitchenette, this time. A woman, tall and elegant with an air of authority. The silent tension deepened, and Julia's heart raced again, but for different reasons this time. Another twist in the unfolding story? Did I miss the family reunion? The woman said with a knowing smile. The air shifted once more, charged and electric with questions about her presence and intentions. Who was she, and how would she change everything? Julia's eyes widened, the truth already stirring deep in her gut, as she sought to ground herself in the whirlwind of revelations and uncertainties. Would this be the storm that ultimately tore them apart, or the one that rebuilt their fragile foundations? The woman stepped further into the room, her presence shattering the suffocating atmosphere. Her hair flowed like silk, and she wore a fitted dress that spoke of wealth and sophistication. Julia's heart raced. Who was she? And what role would she play in this already fractured family gathering? Mom. Julia's voice wavered, unsure how to fit this new piece into the puzzle. Instinctively, she looked to her father, whose face was a mixture of surprise and guilt. I didn't know, he started, but the words trailed off. Of course you didn't, the woman replied, her tone cool and dismissive. You've been busy with your own life. She looked at Julia, her keen eyes appraising. And you must be Julia. Julia pressed her lips together, unwilling to give this stranger the satisfaction of her surprise. Yes. And you are? Call me Sarah, she said, lifting her chin slightly. I work with your father. I'm here to help. The tension thickened, and Julia's heart sank. Help? In what way? It was hard to trust anyone right now, especially when it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. David, still perched on Grandma's lap, darted curious glances from Julia to Sarah. What do you help with? He asked innocently, his youthful curiosity cutting through the tension again. Just a little project for your grandpa, Sarah said, her smile unwavering. I think we can make things much brighter around here. Bright? Julia repeated incredulously. This isn't about brightness. It's about reconnecting. About family. Exactly, Sarah replied, her gaze shifting from Julia to her father. And it's a great idea to start with family. But let us also consider simplifying this adjustment, shall we? Julia felt a surge of protectiveness rise in her chest. I don't think you understand what's at stake here. We've only just begun to talk, and you're suggesting changes. Her father looked lost between the two women, his hands clenching and unclenching in his lap. Sarah, he began softly, almost pleadingly. Don't worry, I'm just here to offer support, she interrupted, her voice firm but smooth. Sometimes a little bit of enthusiasm is all that is needed to break the ice. Julia felt a familiar frustration bubbling. Support? Or control? Before she could say more, David's small hand tugged at her arm. Mom, I like her. She seems nice. His innocence only served to heighten the emotions swirling in the room. For a heartbeat, Julia's resolve faltered. She looked at her son, his excitement dancing in his bright eyes. Did he see what she couldn't see? Was there a silver lining lurking behind this strange woman's confident demeanor? Tonight is about connecting with your father, Grandma interjected, her voice low but steady. Let us not make this harder than it has to be. Hard or not, it's the truth, Julia said, feeling a renewed strength rise within her. We need to face what has happened between us, not cover it with new decorations or false smiles. Sarah glanced at the older woman, a glimmer of annoyance flashing across her features. Truth can be subjective, and that word hung heavily in the air, weaving through Julia's mind. How could they define truth? Each of them had their own version, shaped by pain and regret. As she looked around the room, Julia could almost see the walls vibrating with unsaid words, secrets buried beneath the surface. Maybe we all need to be honest about what we want, Julia said quietly, her voice still firm. I want to know why my father suddenly reappears, and why you're here too. There was a pregnant pause. All eyes were on her father. Isn't it time you tell her, Danny? Sarah said, folding her arms. Danny. That single name carried such weight. As uncertainty coiled tightly around her heart, Julia wondered if this would be the moment that lifted the veil, or if it would expose wounds too raw to heal. The clock ticked loudly once more. The air felt electric, charged with unanswered questions. Julia's heart raced at the possibility of truth unspooling. But would it reveal the clarity she needed or leave only more debris in its wake? What is going on? David asked again, looking back and forth between the adults. Julia's breath caught. She suddenly realized she was standing at a crossroads, and there was no turning back. Would they stumble toward an understanding, or were they headed straight for a crash? As her father shifted in his chair, penny drops of worry began to accumulate in Julia's chest. She braced herself, knowing the truth could shatter everything she held dear, but she also felt the flicker of hope. What if it led to something new? The moment of unmasking felt imminent. The room fell silent, each member of the family holding their breath as they waited for Danny to respond. Julia could feel a heaviness in the air, the kind that clung to her skin and made her heart race even faster. Her father's hands trembled slightly as he leaned forward, his gaze darting between Sarah and Julia. Okay, he finally said, his voice a low rumble. You deserve to know the truth. Julia felt a shiver run down her spine. The words were heavy with weight, each syllable saturated with emotion. She glanced at David, who was still nestled in Grandma's lap, his innocent curiosity wide-eyed and sparkling. Did he understand the stakes? Did he know the world they were teetering on the edge of? Julia, the reason I left, Danny's voice cracked as he tried to find the right words. It was not just about me. I made mistakes. I was scared. Your mother stopped there, Sarah interjected, crossing her arms with a confident stance. This isn't the time for justifications, Danny. Julia needs clarity. Clarity? Julia echoed incredulously, feeling the intensity of her body heat flare. All I want is honesty. Honesty will hurt, and we don't want to hurt anyone here, Sarah said coolly, her refined tone masking an undercurrent of tension. Too late for that. Julia shot back, her frustration boiling over. Just tell me why you suddenly feel the need to be part of my life. Why now? I've been trying to change to be better, Danny said, avoiding Julia's gaze. I thought I was doing the right thing by stepping back, but I see now that it only hurt all of us. And I'm just supposed to take that at face value? Julia's voice raised slightly, every word carrying the frustration of years filled with questions. Mom. David's voice pierced through the rising storm. He looked between the adults, his brows furrowed. Can we just say what is going on? I don't understand. This childlike interruption brought a jolt to Julia's heart. She turned and saw David's earnest expression. Suddenly, she felt a mix of sadness and rage swell up. This was not a burden he should have to bear. He deserved joy, connection, and most importantly, honesty. David, sweetie, she murmured, trying to buy herself a moment. It's complicated is how it felt when Dad left, David said, his voice steady but vulnerable. You always told me that family is important, so why isn't Dad here every day? Julia felt the cold rush of reality hit her, amplifying what she already knew deep down. Her own barriers were crumbling, and the truth loomed just beyond their reach like a storm about to break. She looked between her father and Sarah, feeling the underlying conflict ignite anew. Dad, Julia said, shaking her head slightly. We need to face this together. Right now? Danny looked pained. He nodded, swallowed hard, and straightened in his seat, as if preparing for battle. There's something you need to know about Sarah. Julia's heart thudded loudly in her ears. The way he said her name carried weight, suggesting layers of connection that hung heavy in the air. What do you mean? Julia asked, her voice trembling. Before Danny could answer, Sarah stepped forward, her face suddenly earnest yet guarded. I care about him and about you. What? Julia exclaimed, bewilderment washing over her. You're involved with him? It's more than that. It's complicated, Sarah said quickly, her composure cracking for the first time. I love him. But love? Julia repeated in disbelief. You love him after everything? You're the one inviting chaos into our lives. Julia, please, Danny started, desperation in his tone. I want you to know that this isn't just about the past, it's not only about rebuilding. I want a future with both of you. But what if the future is worse? Julia whispered, her heart aching at the thought of repeating old wounds. What if it destroys what little we have left? Tension swelled around them again, heavy and relentless, but now a fragile hope flickered in the corners. Was it possible to embark on this journey of truth, no matter where it led? As the silence settled, even David seemed to sense that everything was about to change, that the night held secrets far deeper than they ever imagined, lying there just beneath the surface. And in the pit of her stomach, Julia felt it, a sense of foreboding mingled with a flicker of hope. Could they really uncover the truth, or were they destined for another heartbreak? Mom. David's gentle voice brought her back, his eyes wide with innocent understanding. What does this mean? Julia looked around the room at her father, Sarah, and then back to David. I don't know yet, she said softly, but we're going to find out together. The moment felt pivotal, laden with the weight of uncharted territory. What came next would either bind them together or completely tear them apart. As she stared into her father's eyes, searching for answers, Julia knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a storm that was about to change everything. The silence stretched, thick and electric, as Danny seemed to search for words that could bridge the chasm created by years of absence and regret. Julia's heart raced wildly, as she realized they were on the brink of something monumental, and she desperately hoped it wasn't another lie. I know I've failed you, Danny said finally, his voice barely a whisper. But I want to be part of your life. I can't change the past, but I want to be there moving forward for both of you. David shifted on Grandma's lap, leaning closer, his small hands tightening around her sweater. Julia felt the weight of his gaze, full of trust and confusion. How could she assure him everything would be okay when she wasn't even convinced herself? Part of that means being honest about relationships, about love. Danny continued, his eyes locked on Julia's, imploring her comprehension. Sarah came into my life when I was at my lowest. I was broken. Sarah's breath caught, and for a moment, the tears she had been holding back threatened to spill. I never meant to complicate things, Julia. I thought her voice trembled. I thought he was beyond repair until I saw a spark of hope in him. A spark? Julia replied, her disbelief boiling over. You think that's enough? To just flick a switch, and everything becomes fine? Maybe it's more than just a spark, Danny said, desperation creeping in. If there's anything I could take back, it'd be those years. I want to work on mending everything we lost. David's small voice broke through the turmoil. So, we're supposed to just forget that you left us? That you didn't even care enough to talk to us? His eyes held a mixture of hurt and longing, so pure that Julia felt her heart break a little more. Julia attempted, but he shook his head, tears welling up. What if I want a real family? That means having you both in my life, not just part-time or every now and then. Julia felt swallowed by emotion herself. We all want love, David. A family that's whole, but love isn't just words. It's years of building trust. The room was so silent. She could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, marking every second of their tension. The weight of Danny and Sarah's past loomed over them with a sense of inevitability, but Julia's heart fluttered with the possibility of change. Danny, what if it's harder than we think? She asked, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. What if we falter? What if we hurt each other again? He shook his head slowly, an ache in his eyes. Then we pick up the pieces together. This time, I want to run. I'm here, willing to face whatever comes together. The resolve in his voice struck a chord deep within her. Was it worth it to try? They were floundering in murky waters, but a glimmer of light shone through the cracks. Could love, if rekindled, be strong enough to rebuild what had been lost? David, sensing the shift, leaned closer, faced Uncle and Sarah with genuine curiosity. So, are you saying we really could be a family? Julia choked back a fresh swell of tears, feeling both hope and fear collide in her chest. The weight of responsibility settled over her, but David's innocent gaze held her together. She could see now that this wasn't just about her parents. It was about him too. Well, Julia cleared her throat, steeling herself. If we're going to be a family, then we need to start right now, with honesty and with love. Agreed, Danny replied, his voice resolute. I'll do whatever it takes. But as they gathered together, the storm clouds of uncertainty began to swirl again. Julia couldn't shake the feeling that more secrets lurked just at the edge of their newfound willingness. What else lay hidden beneath the surfaces? Before she could voice her worries, David interrupted again, excitement dancing in his eyes. Like a real family meeting? Something like that. Julia smiled, but her heart remained heavy with the question of whether they could truly recover the threads of their lives. As they began to navigate their emotions, she felt a renewed sense of determination. Julia glanced back at Danny, their eyes meeting, with fierce intensity, and she knew that no matter how challenging this journey would be, they had to be ready to confront every hidden truth. In this moment of fragile beginnings, the call for honesty pierced through, inviting them to step toward a future that was as uncertain as it was necessary. But Julia couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they weren't done yet. What else do we need to talk about? She whispered, her stomach twisting, and as they stood together, she realized the road ahead would lead them to answers they still hadn't yet discovered. Julia sat in the kitchen, swirling the remnants of her uneaten pasta, her thoughts racing like a car in overdrive. The weight of the revelations just shared weighed heavily on her chest. Surrounded by family, the silence felt suffocating. Each breath held a promise and a weight of anticipation that was hard to ignore. David continued leaning into her side, his little body radiating warmth, a stark contrast to the icy tension still hanging thick in the air. He knew something important was happening, but was blissfully unaware of the complexity of adult relationships. Julia's heart panged with the need to protect him from the tumult, while also understanding how crucial it was to face the storm as a family. Danny cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. Julia, I truly want to do better. For you. For David. His voice, once filled with unsure distance, now held a firmness that suggested he was ready for the struggle ahead. Julia flickered her gaze between him and Sarah, taking in the mixture of emotion on both their faces. Could this really be the turning point they'd always yearned for? Or was it another facade waiting to crumble? Dad, Julia began, her voice quaking yet resolute. If we are going to move forward, we need to promise to be 100% honest. No sugarcoating. Just truth. The air shifted at her words, thickening with an unspoken agreement to confront whatever was hidden. Danny nodded firmly, but Julia could see a flicker of anxiety cross his features. I promise, he replied, voice unwavering. But there's more. It's about Sarah. What do you mean? Julia's brows furrowed, alarm bells ringing. The last thing she wanted was a complicated love triangle when they were still figuring out their own chaotic dynamics. I've not only hurt you, but I failed her too. Danny's voice dropped, filled with remorse. I took for granted that she would always be there to support me while I sorted myself out. I can't expect a family built on guilt and pain. Sarah glanced at Danny, and for a moment they were two lives bound by a decision they hadn't yet made. I was as broken as you, Danny. We found comfort in our flaws, in shared pain. But Julia, she deserves so much more than that. More than brokenness? More than guilt? Julia interjected, anger bubbling. She felt the intensity of their shared past shadowing over her, and yet the hopeful glimmers of change dared to light the path. Then tell me what we do about it, or I'll not know how to trust this, she added, her conviction shining through the uncertainty. What transpired next felt like an emotional explosion. Sarah's honesty was a balm to Julia's weary heart. Julia, I respect you. I see the struggle you've faced, and I felt the pain of watching it from the sidelines. I promise you that's not the life I want to drag into the future. Julia watched as the layers peeled back. The fight turned into a quest for clarity. It felt liberating to shed the skin of old grievances and move forward with purpose. It's going to take work, Julia said, voice trembling slightly but infused with determination. But I want to be open to this. It's not just about you two. It's about our family, David included. David's eyes widened in excitement, innocent possibility shining through as he bounced a little on Grandma's lap. That sounds awesome. A real family team. His voice bubbled with joy, and in that moment, Julia felt the fractures in her heart beginning to mend. Teamwork, Danny echoed, but Julia could sense the shadows lingering in their futures, a past that could resurrect if they didn't tread lightly. But how? Julia felt her heart race at the uncertain territory. Together, we talk. Openly. Weekly family check-ins, if we must. We owe it to each other to communicate. No secrets. The atmosphere shifted, as promise hovered in the air between them like a thread, tethering them to their newly chosen path. The rest of the evening passed in a whirlwind of laughter, deep conversations, and a few tears as they shared stories, building a tapestry of who they were as individuals and who they could become as a collective. Julia felt alive again, the walls that had enclosed her heart beginning to crumble as the sun dipped below the horizon that night, casting a warm glow into the living room. Julia knew they had achieved something monumental. Not perfection, not total healing yet, but a commitment to forge ahead in the spirit of honesty and love. She looked around at the faces before her, David, repeating the words real family with a beaming smile that filled the room, and felt the corners of her lips lift into a wide smile. They were not what they once were, and maybe that was the point. And amidst the laughter and new memories being crafted, Julia felt a swell of gratitude. She wasn't just a mother fighting against overwhelming odds or a daughter reclaiming her past. She was finally finding her place, creating a new foundation of love for David and herself, despite the swirling uncertainties. From here on, we rise together, Julia declared, her voice rising with confidence, echoing the hope that now filled the room. They all nodded, committing to the journey that awaited, with hearts open to endless possibilities. With a sense of purpose rooted firmly within her, Julia knew what came next time to turn these promises into palpable changes. She felt ready, ready to chase dreams, build bonds, and face whatever storms might come with newfound strength. And in every flicker of laughter that lit the corners of the living room, she felt more at home than ever before. Now that you've experienced this incredible transformation, it's your turn to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It matters. Comment below your thoughts and feelings about this moving ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait, not even one more second to share. True fans like you know how important it is to support the channel in these ways.